Hey guys, and welcome to another episode of Behind the Closed Doors. And today is a special one because today it's actually, well, you can find it back in two playlists, quite frankly, and Behind the Closed Doors, because today I'm gonna mix a product review and a behind the scenes look during today's workshop. And today's workshop is actually creativity and styling. It's the workshop that Nadine and I co-teach, and it's all about lighting, sets, and of course styling. You might wonder, what is the tech review about? Well, this one I have been wanting to do for at least 2 years. It's about the Techart converter to make manual focus lenses autofocus. So join us for today's episode of Behind the Closed Doors and Quite Frankly. Now I think 2 or 3 years ago I got an email from somebody. Hey Frank, I know you love vintage lenses. Do you know there's a company that's actually going to work on a module that will make any manual focusable lens autofocus? And I was going like, what? Really? That's going to be awesome. And during Photokina a few years later, I actually found the company Techart. And they literally were creating that little adapter. And that's actually where, well, sadly for me, the story stopped, because I couldn't get in contact with the company. I wanted a review sample, and somehow, well, it took a long time. To make a long story short, a few weeks ago I was approached by Cameraland, which is a Dutch distributor for several brands, to test out a Techart module. And my heart was going like, that's the one. I almost forgot about that converter. So, ladies and gentlemen, I got it here, the Techart converter. But let me first explain you a little bit why this inverter is so incredibly important and some of the trouble we got with it. Now let me give you a little bit of insight about what makes me tick. I absolutely love tech. Now what do I mean with tech? Well, for example, this Huawei phone. We recently switched to it because it was shooting raw 42 megapixels. Do I like it? I absolutely love it. But I also like vintage stuff. So you can't make me more happy than just setting me on the street with this Yashica mat. And why the Yashica mat? Well, it just looks awesome. You have this waist level finder. It's really easy to talk to people when you shoot something like this. And in all honesty, when I shoot something like that and I ask for somebody, can I take your portrait? They never say no. The thing that they do ask, what kind of camera is that? Because a lot of people are not used to those cameras anymore, because nowadays everything is digital. Now, let me dive a little bit into why this Techart module is so incredibly important. And I'm going to give you 2 very simple reasons. And you can choose which of those reasons is actually for you. Now, reason 1, of course, is very, very simple. Reason 1 is you can use very cheap lenses on your modern cameras. And why is that important? Well, we don't have an unlimited budget, right? And when you can buy a 50mm like this, which is actually a 1.8 50mm Pentacon, which is an okay lens, but I bought it for, believe it or not, 10 euros on the flea market. And 10 euros wasn't even the lens. For 10 euros I bought the camera, a strobe, some other accessories and this lens. So this lens is probably bought for, let's say, 5 euros. But you can also use other glass. And this is, for example, a Leica lens. Let me take the cap off. So this is a Leica lens, and this is not a really expensive one, but with Leica there is no cheap glass. This is a 100mm f4. According to some, it's not one of the best lenses Leica made, but hey, I really like to test it out, and I bought it for Leica relatively cheap on eBay. So you have this really cheap glass, and you have the more expensive glass. But why is that so important? Well, first off, if you don't have a lot of money, these lenses will give you immediately a lot of choices. For example, you can go to a prime 24 2.8 or even 2.0. You can do a 35, you can buy a 50, a 135, a 200, and maybe even some nice macro lenses. And you stay below 200 euros for all those lenses. So in other words, if you start out with photography, 200 euros in lenses, and you can shoot whatever you want to your heart's content, and you have every single lens that you need. While if you go for new, you will actually probably buy a 24 to 70, which will set you back anywhere between, let's say, 300 euro for a really cheap one that won't give you any quality, to 2200 euros for example, the Sony. And in all honesty, that Sony glass is absolutely perfect. There's no chromatic aberration. It's pin sharp from left to right. It has well, very neutral colors. It has a beautiful bokeh, and bokeh is the background. That's autofocus. And it just is an amazing lens. Super fast autofocus. You wouldn't wish for anything more. That is, until you start to realize something. And that realization comes really fast when you shoot a little bit longer. What is it that makes this so unique? It's not only the camera itself, because if you shoot with it and you get the same images you get from, for example, your cell phone or a digital camera, it takes out all the fun. What makes it unique is actually the look. Now, if you ask 10 photographers what determines the look of an image nowadays, people will often go like, oh, I use alien skin exposure, I use DxO film pack, I use luminar, I use presets. No, I didn't ask you that. What determines the look of the photo? Yeah, I told you, Photoshop, Lightroom, DxO. And in all honesty, they're absolutely right. Because nowadays, with modern glass, you get a certain look. And those looks vary a little bit. So, for example, a very expensive Sony lens will be almost perfect out of the box. And will just give you neutral colors, everything looks nice, everything looks perfect, there's hardly any vignetting. And vignetting actually means that the corners of the image are a little bit darker. It just looks perfect. Now when you go to really cheap lens, and I won't mention any brands, but you know what I mean, right? The really cheap ones that you buy for, let's say, $199 or $200 for the 24-70, you know what to expect. The images will be soft, even stop down, there will be some chromatic aberration, and chromatic aberration means that the colors don't really fit on top of each other. It looks very exaggerated. It looks a little bit like a 3D movie. So you see a green on the sides. Sometimes you see purple fringing. That means that you see purple around high contrast areas. It just doesn't look nice. And then when you look at the background, which is out of focus, it will look a little bit wonky or a little bit weird, but not in a good way. Now, step back. So we have this perfect lens, and we have this lens that doesn't look nice. Now I ask you again, what determines the look in your photo? But now you will probably say, okay, so the lens can also be an element between being really bad and really good. And now we're almost there. Now let's take, for example, well, this lens. This is a Helios 44-2. Now if you talk about almost mythical proportions in, one could say, hyping a lens. One could say, well, they're actually right. This is a prime example. It's a prime lens. Got the joke? This is actually a 58mm f2 lens, and you can buy this for a really cheap for the moment, because I'm afraid that those prices will go up a lot. And what makes this lens so unique? It's the bokeh. It's the out of focus areas in the back. It has this really weird swirly effect, and some people love it, some people hate it. I do remember that when I started out with digital photography, a lot of people were actually complaining about the backdrops. They were going like, I don't like this bokeh, it has to be round, or it has to be this. When you know DP Review or Fred Miranda forums, there were a lot of those forums that actually only talked about the bokeh of a lens. When you know Digital Rev, you know that actually Kai always talked about bokehlicious. And I think this is one of those lenses that at one point will be absolutely destroyed because the bokeh looks, according to that time period, terrible. But if you look at it now, actually a lot of people love how this looks because it gives the image character. And that's actually where it's all about. Today during the workshop I'm going to be shooting with the Sony a7R III. Now this is my favorite lens. This is the 24-70 2.8 G Master. Hey, what's in the name? This lens is amazing. It's absolutely stunning. If you are going to the Sony system, it isn't a cheap lens, but dude, really get this lens because it's amazing. But today we're going to take it off and we're going to mount the Techart adapter. We're going to use one of these converters, and we're actually going to use Leica glass and M42. Now originally the Techart module only fits Leica M glass. Now for all you guys that are just starting out and you hear M42, Leica R, Leica M, M42, you go like, what? Well, let me put it very simple. If you buy a Canon, you have a Canon mount. That means that all your lenses fit your Canon camera, right? If you have a Nikon lens, it won't fit your Canon camera. So if you have a Nikon, you have of course a Leica mount. So that means that your Nikon lenses won't fit on a Canon camera, and with Sony the same. So every single manufacturer has its own mount. And that was also in the old days, of course. Now, in the old days, one of the mounts that was used a lot was actually the M42 screw mount. This is a mount where you can very easily just screw on your lens and you can use it. So a lot of manufacturers actually use those mounts. But you also had Leica with the M mount and of course Leica with the Air mount. Now let's not make any fairy tales. Leica M glass is ridiculously expensive. It's, in my opinion, way overpriced. Now Leica R glass, which according to some Leica enthusiasts isn't any Leica glass, but hey, I disagree because, and even when you read the forums, Leica R is really nice glass. And Leica R, when I started buying it, and this is like a few years ago because I've been into this manual stuff for a long time, but when I started buying these lenses, they were all in the range of maybe 200, 400, maybe 500 euros. And of course there were more expensive ones. But for example, I bought this, let me see, where is it? This 50mm for approximately, I think somewhere in the 400 euro range. Now I looked it up online and you can actually see prices ranging from 9.99 all the way to 15.99 for this lens. What I advise you guys to do with this kind of tech is actually buy those cheaper lenses, because that's also the lenses that give you the most character. And that character, that's what it's all about actually. I just love the look of this 28 Leica R. But I also absolutely love the almost lomography. That means very cheap, and let me put it this way, it just means bad. I just really like the lomography quality of this lens, which again I bought for approximately 5 euros. And you could see it as a family. Some of these lenses are very shy to light, so as soon as they see something, they will start to flare. And the flares, by the way, are totally different from the flares that you see nowadays. Some lenses will be razor sharp, some lenses will be a little bit fake. It's just like a family. Some people are a little bit fake, some people are really sharp and fast. So let's take a little bit of a look at what the adapter actually does, because it does sound a little bit weird, like manual focus lenses into, well, autofocus. So again, it's made actually for Leica M glass. So when I take this off, I can immediately mount a Leica M lens on front of this. But again, I don't have Leica M money, so we have to get something else. Now, almost for every lens imaginable, there are converters. And those converters you can put on your own camera. They are for Canon, Nikon, for Sony, whatever. And those converters make it possible for you to actually take one of these M42 lenses, screw it on a converter, put it on front of your camera, and you can actually use that lens in manual focus. So for example, use your peaking in your camera, or just do it by eye, which I wouldn't recommend nowadays, but hey, you can always try it. But peaking works really fine. And for some cameras, that actually means that you have to shoot on the LCD on the back. If you have a camera with an EVF, you can of course use peaking in your EVF. So why do we need converters? Well, let's make one thing clear firstly. It's not only the mount that differs, it's also the flange distance. Now what is the flange distance? It's the distance between this back element and your sensor. Now those lenses are built for focusing, right? So you can focus to infinity or you can focus close up. And that actually changes inside the lens. Now it changes distances, right? So that's what focusing is. It changes the distance between the elements and your sensor. Now if you have a Sony A7R like this, you see that when you take the lens off, there's a really shallow space between the lens mount and the sensor. So that means that it has a very tight flange distance. And that actually makes this camera absolutely amazing to mount almost every single lens out there. Because if that flange distance is too long, like for example if you have a 5D Mark IV, the sensor is actually pretty deep in the body. And that means that for some glass like Leica M or Leica R, it's a little bit difficult to create a converter because it has to be closer to that sensor. And that actually means that sometimes you lose, for example, focus to infinity, which can be pretty handy, by the way. Now for a portrait, focus to infinity, not that important, but for example for landscapes it can be important. So flange distance. That also means that every single converter takes into account the mount and of course the distance between that last element and the sensor. So that's why, for example, one will be a little bit like this and one will be a little bit more deeper, as you can see here. I hope you can see that on the video. Now the Techart module is of course a Leica M mount. So how do you mount, for example, an M42 lens on a Leica M mount? You need a converter from, for example, Leica R to Leica M. And that's actually, let me see, that's the converter I have here. So you can recognize that by seeing LR to LM, Leica R to Leica M. In a perfect world, which of course never exists, you just take that Leica M converter, you put it on your Leica M mount, and then you mount your Leica R glass. Well, the Techart is an amazing piece of kit, but I think the guy who designed it was a little bit asleep at the wheel. Because when you look at it, you see this little bump. And in that bump, there's actually behind it, there's the motor system. Now, when you take this little piece of metal off, and by the way, it's constructed really nicely. But if you take this piece of metal off, you see that they could have designed it by making this a little bit less tight. And that's where the whole problem comes in. Because I got these converters in, and the M42 immediately mounted on my Leica M mount. Awesome, so you could use M42 lenses on the Techart. The only thing that bothered me a little bit, it was incredibly tight. Now, when I tried it with the Leica M version to Leica R, I got into a lot of trouble. It just didn't fit. Whatever I tried, it didn't fit. There was like a gaping hole of like 2 millimeters, and I just couldn't make it fit. Now, on the website from Techart, they actually sell you converters that go for like 70 bucks. And a lot of people will look at those prices and go like, hey, the Techart module is already around 400, and now I have to buy for 70 euros, I have to buy this one. You know what, just forget about it. That's a lot of money. Now, when you look online, you can actually buy these for about, well, 15, 17 euros. I actually bought these two together from China, including shipping, and they were here in about 10 days for, believe it or not, 37 euros. So that's two converters, including shipping, for 37 euros. But they didn't fit. Well, you can panic, or you can just find a solution. So we went to our neighbors Griesnich, and we actually asked them, can you please make these fit? And they did. So they took off a lot from this one, and they took off a little bit of this one, and now they fit in perfectly. So let's see how the magic works when you fit your lenses. So first off, of course, take off this. Now let's go for the M42 for now. That's this one. There you go. Click. Really like that sound. Take an M42 lens, and that's a screw mount, and you just screw it on here. And there you go. Now, doesn't that already look really cool? So what is that magic? Well, watch this. As soon as you turn your camera on, you can see that now focusing is actually done by extending the converter. And this is absolutely genius because, again, focusing is changing that distance between that back element and, of course, the sensor, but also inside the lens. So by doing this, you actually get that old-fashioned system that we also had on, for example, the Mamiya RC67 Pro 2, where you focus by using a bellows focus, by changing that lens forward and backward. So this is really cool. But there's something else that a lot of people don't think about. Now, when I want to take a picture, for example, like this, in a lot of cases that won't work because one of the limitations of lenses is actually how close can you shoot. So, for example, some of these older lenses, they can make perfect portraits, but you have to be like 1.5 meters away. And that sometimes limits, because sometimes you want to make a portrait that's a little bit closer, you come closer, and you can't focus anymore because you have to move back. Now, when you normally start up with your Techart module, they always advise you, put your focus on infinity. There you go. So put your focus on infinity, power up your camera, and just start shooting. And that works really nice, but you will have that minimum focus distance. Now there's a little trick. Don't focus to infinity, but just focus, for example, all the way here. Now, of course, it won't focus to infinity anymore because the Techart module can only move a little bit. But you can shoot really close. You can actually make, out of a 50mm, you can make a macro lens without using a real macro lens. Now, are those lenses really meant to be shot up that close? Yes and no. And again, it's all about character. It's all about how it looks. So by using that little trick, you actually can move way closer to your subject. Now, is it all perfect? Well, not really, but it comes really close. I'm going to give you some advice that I found out during just a few hours with this module. Okay, first off, using a 28mm, no problem at all. You just put it on infinity and it just focuses over the whole range. Using a 135, not that much luck. For the very simple reason, you need more range. So that means when you use a lens like this, what I try to do is I will just focus a little bit like, I think it's in that area, and then I just use the autofocus. So it's a little bit of a mix. Now, in all honesty, I only tried it for a few hours, but already it feels like second nature. You just pre-focus, and then the final focus you actually do with your autofocus system. And it's a trick I actually learned many years ago from a sports photographer. And at that time, the autofocus wasn't that fast. And he always told me, and I heard the same thing from a bird photographer, I just pre-focus and then I let my autofocus take over. And nowadays, of course, with the modern autofocus systems, they're really fast. So you don't use that technique anymore, but it's actually an old technique. So just pre-focus and then let the adapter do the rest. Okay, now let's talk a little bit about noise. Now, normally with your autofocus motor, they're really quiet. You don't hear a lot. But with this one, let's hold it close to the mic. You can hear a little bit of that focusing, of course. And how is it with speed? Well, very simple. It's pretty dark in the studio. And let me just focus on a camera that's over here. First, let's take it totally out of focus. There we go. Aim it at the camera. And I'm now going to press 1, 2, 3. And there we go. And I'm going to shift the focus over the camera. And you can hear, even in the pitch dark, it's really fast. And again, it's pretty dark and the focus is just fast. Now, can you expect something like, for example, the Sony 24-70? No, of course not. Come on. This is an adapter. It isn't native. But in all honesty, I expected it to be way worse than it is. I expected it to be like beep. In all honesty, what I get is the auto performance of an okay lens. Don't expect anything stellar like this 24-70. This is insane. It's almost like voodoo. It's that fast. So don't expect anything stellar, but don't expect a really slow focusing adapter. This baby really is fast. So on which cameras do I advise to use an adapter like this? Well, they designed it, I think, in the period where the A7R II was just coming out. And on that camera, I didn't test it, but I know how much faster the autofocus is on the A7R III. In all honesty, I think on the A7R II you will be fine. On the A7R III, this is becoming a real alternative between using autofocus lenses. And the alternative is very simple. You have this beautiful bokeh in the backdrop if you like it, but all these lenses ranging from the 24 or 28mm Leica to the macro to that Helios lens, they all have that different character, and that really makes using an adapter like this amazing. So today, the workshop, creativity and styling, and today I'm going to be shooting with this adapter and all the vintage lenses. So join us for the workshop. But before, by the way, I do have to tell you one little thing about this adapter. And this may or may have not occurred to you. When you shoot in the Sony system, the auto focus system has face recognition. Believe it or not, it works. There are even lenses out there that use eye focus. So one of the perks from Sony is actually that when you press the OK button, you can program it under any button, by the way, I believe, but I use it under the OK button, it finds the eye. So it doesn't find the face, it really finds the eye of the model, focuses on it, and it works. So with some combinations, that even works with a Techart module. But the coolest thing, of course, is image stabilization. It's inside the camera and it works. So how does the camera know what kind of lens you have on there? Because image stabilization, of course, is different from a 28mm to a 135. Well, you can actually use the aperture setting in the camera. So not on the lens, because all these lenses, of course, have aperture settings on the lens barrel, which a lot of people prefer. And I also like it, but I also like it in the camera. But you can use the settings in the camera to actually determine your focal length. And that will be recorded in the exit values. They thought of everything. Okay, Nadine is almost here. Let's start with the workshop. And after that, I'm going to show you the results and some close-ups, of course, of this, well, Techart module. I'm so excited about it. Thank you so much, Cameraland, for lending this to me. And well, I don't think you're going to get it back. So just send me a bill. I'm going to keep this one. Awesome. Okay, let's take a quick in-between look at what I found really interesting about the Techart module. Now, we have different kind of lenses, right? So we have a 50mm, we have the 100, we have a 135, and we have a 50 or whatever. How does the camera know which lens is on there for the extra value or image stabilization or whatever? You can actually use the dial from your camera to set it up, and it sounds weird, but it really works. It will record in the extra value, the value you set this dial on. So standard, you have to put it on f2, that's normal operation. Now when, for example, you want to use a 50mm, you just change the aperture to the desired 50mm setting, and you make one picture, and you just put it back on f2.0. After that, all the images you take, the camera will actually think it's using that focal length. So in all honesty, for me personally, I don't want to take one picture and then put it back on 2.0. I would just change lenses. But if you are really like, I want to make sure that I'm shooting outside, my image stabilization has to be perfect, I want to make sure that my exit value is correct, you just change it with the dial on the back of your camera. You take one picture, you put everything back, and from there everything is recorded in camera in your exif information. Another thing, of course, that's really interesting is firmware updates, because this is not a dumb converter. A lot of people emailed me when I started doing this review a few weeks ago because I was waiting for these converters. They actually emailed me like, hey Frank, I really like the idea, but why is the thing so incredibly expensive? First of all, it's the only one that really works. I believe there's a competitor out there. I saw some videos. It's a little bit cheaper, but it performs a lot worse. So just go for the Techart. Another thing is the motor, of course, the whole engineering behind it. It's a unique product, but also there's a Bluetooth module inside where you can update your firmware. There's an app for Android and iPhone, and you can just update the firmware by using your Bluetooth settings. But you can also change which focal lengths you want to use on which aperture. So if you go like, hey, in the original, you can set it up for example, let's say f11 is 11 millimeters, f13 is 15, and you don't like that order, just change it around in the firmware. So that's one of the things that I also really like about this product. It's not a product where they just go like, okay, we want to make manual focusable lenses, autofocus, just do something. It's a product that they really thought of, and in all honesty, I'm just totally blown away by it. So let's continue.
I've never been the one who's worried, always been the one who's keeping it cool. The kind of guy who chill while others hurry. I didn't know that I've been the fool. I've been telling lies about something real, but I know love is based on honesty. Kept thinking how real love should feel, knowing that it's not just you, it's me, 'cause I was made to be free. I am made to be free. I am made to be free. Well, I am made to be free. To be free. When I know that it's not how you get me. When the lights are out and you stumble in the dark, you kept pushing on, but then you went too far. When your ship has sailed and all your dreams are lost, everything is wrong, you feel like it's your fault. Just remember, I will be there for you, baby. Remember, Just call on me to get you, don't forget to get you, to get you, don't forget to get you, to get you, don't forget to get you, to get you, don't forget to get you. You're stronger now than you ever been. You gotta leave now, it's time to catch the wind. You will climb up high and look through the clouds. And when you're feeling low, I know you'll bounce back. Oh, and just remember, I will be there for you, baby. Remember, there's nothing out there to get you, don't forget it. When life throws lemons, just call on me to get you, don't forget to just call on me to get you, don't forget to just call on me to get you, don't forget to get you, to get you, don't forget to just call on me, baby, I'll be there. Just call on me, baby, I swear that I'll be there. I'll just call on me, baby, I'll be there. I'll be there. Call me, baby, I swear that I'll be there. And so remember, I will be there for you, baby. Remember, there's nothing out there to get you. When life throws lemons, just call on me.
Okay, I'm done with the workshop, and of course first you want to see the results, and after that I'm going to tell you my conclusion on the Techart module. So here we go with the final results. I hope you like those results. Now, my opinion on the Techart module, it's very simple. We're going to do it in two parts. Part one, absolutely love it because now you can use all those manual focusable lenses on your Sony camera and actually have autofocus. And those lenses again have their own character and it's really cool to work with those lenses. There is, however, something that you do have to realize. Now, how does a lens focus? A lens focuses by aperture. It sounds weird, but it's absolutely true. So that's why in the studio we always advise people to buy the fastest glass you can get. So for example, if you can afford a 2.8 lens, get a 2.8 lens. If you can't afford it, maybe go to an f4, but never go for those kit lenses that are actually like 5.6. Because the more light that hits the sensor, the faster the autofocus actually will be. So in the studio, the focusing is of course very vital for the very simple reason there isn't a lot of light. When you go outside and you're in the bright sun, you have a lot of light, so your focusing is fast. With these old lenses, you actually preset your aperture. So for example, this one is now on 2.8, but when I want to shoot on f16, I have to set my aperture on f16, and I don't know if you can see it inside, probably not. The aperture just changes when you turn this dial. So in other words, again, I don't think you can see it on camera, just believe me for it. When I change the aperture, the hole will get bigger and actually smaller. So that means that there's a lot of light hitting the sensor wide open and just a little bit of light when you close it down. And this is where the problem comes in for the Techart if you're working in the studio. Now, as long as you have the modeling lights on full power and you use a lot of light, the focusing goes great. It's fast enough for a portrait. It's not as fast as the native glass, but it's fast enough for a portrait. It's fast enough for the studio, and it just works. It's spot on. It's razor sharp on some lenses. It depends on the lens, of course. But in other words, it's very accurate. Now, as soon as you start doing some stuff with backlighting, low contrast scenes, a little bit of light, and you want to shoot it on f11, forget about it. It won't work because your lens will start hunting like crazy. So we did a lot of shots inside the studio today at 5.6. And we had the modeling lights on full power, and it worked flawlessly on the 50mm lenses. As soon as I went to the 135, it became a little bit more difficult to get that focus right, even on 5.6. It's not because of the shallower depth of field, but the lens was just hunting. Now here's some of you guys going like, hey Frank, but on 135, doesn't the Techart actually disable the autofocus function? That's absolutely true, but I didn't change it to 135 lens. I just left it on 50mm. And for image stabilization, let's be honest, in the studio, the strobes freeze the motion, so we don't need image stabilization for that. So it hunted a little bit more on the 135. When you go outside with that same lens, I could shoot on f5.6 or f8 without any problem, and it's not even that bright outside today. So it's really the more lens that hits that sensor, the better your performance will be, which actually makes sense, right, if you know how an autofocus system works. Now there's a little trick you might be able to pull off, and that's actually preset your aperture. So you turn it to 2.8 and you focus, you hold the shutter button, and then you just turn your aperture to the desired setting and you press through, and at that point it actually makes the photo. It's a little bit of workaround, which in all honesty I don't like. So what I did today was actually used a small torch, and just lit the model just a little bit with that torch, give it a little bit more contrast, and at that point the focus was dead on every time, click, beep, and it was done. So that's something you have to worry about. The other thing is, a lot of people tell me, Frank, I really like that the aperture ring is on the lens instead of in the camera. This is another thing that you have to be aware of when you buy something like the Techart and you want to use it in the studio. In our studio, it's always pretty dark. I just like to see my modeling lights. Try to read your aperture setting in the pitch dark. It just doesn't work. So make sure you have some light on that aperture ring, or you just preset the aperture on what you want. For example, 5.6, and now you walk on set and you can do your photos. Is it a big thing? No, of course not, because that's how these old lenses work. You have to preset your aperture. But it is something you have to realize, that when you're used to native glass, you just turn the dial and you see in your display your aperture. With these kinds of setups, it's always f2 on the setting in your EVF, and you really have to set that aperture with the ring. Add to that it needs a lot of light to focus, and you know that for some people this will be a little bit of a frustrating experience. The only thing I can tell you guys is bear through, because this is an amazing setup. Those old lenses really have character. I said it before, and shooting with those old lenses in the studio, it's just awesome. Okay, so I promised 2 conclusions. 1, if you're a street shooter or you shoot outside in natural light, get this adapter without any doubt. Don't even think about it. Buy it. Get those $10 lenses, $5 lenses, whatever, and start shooting with it. It's funky. It's great. You Instagram the heck out of a shot without even using Instagram. Those colors, they're different. It's, you know, I'm in love with those old lenses, right? Part 2 of the conclusion is, if you want to use it in the studio, you may want to order one where you have a 30-day bring back guarantee. I can guarantee you that after 30 days you probably don't want to send it back, because you're used to it and you absolutely love that look. But in the studio it's a little bit a mixed bag. The 50mm went great, the 135 was a little bit sluggish, and you need a lot of light. So on 2.8 no problem, on f4 okay, 5.6 it worked, f8 and we really got into some trouble. Now the ELCs from Alengrom have a really bright modeling light. What you can do is just turn down the strobe, set the modeling light on manual, just boost it all the way up so you get a lot of light on your model, and the autofocus was very, very snappy and very fast. If we use proportional and you shoot on 5.6, there's not a lot of light coming from the modeling lights, and the lens started to hunt. So it's a little bit learning to work with that lens, but trust me, it's worth it. It's so much worth it that officially, Cameraland, thank you so much for lending this adapter to me. You're not going to get it back. Just send me a bill, we'll pay for it. This is my adapter now, and I never want to be without it anymore, because again, I love those old lenses. Now, 2 trains of thoughts. 1, I don't have a lot of money for lenses, and I do want to switch to Sony. Can I buy it? Yes, it's an expensive adapter, but it's worth your money because you can use any lens you want, which is made in the past. And these lenses, again, you can buy them for anywhere between €5, or maybe you can get them for free up till, let's say, the Leica R glass. Some prices are ridiculous, but let's say a really, really good M42 lens. And I'm talking about really great, like a size Jena. They will retail anywhere between 100 and 150 euros. And trust me, you get an amazing lens for that amount of money. So if you're on a budget, great. One investment is the adapter. That's a big one. The smaller converters like these, you can buy online and just find somebody that can make them to fit. And let's say your total investment is like 450 euros, and then you can start using all those old lenses. The other part, and that's part 2, that's me. I love those vintage lenses. At that point, it's an absolute no-brainer. Get this product, start using it, and just enjoy that funky, funky look of all those lenses. That's it for today. If you have any questions, leave comments below. This adapter will be with me for a long time. So if you want me to test stuff, just let me know and I will test it for you guys. I hope you liked what we do. Please subscribe to our channel, leave comments below, and of course smash that like button because we really like that. And I'm so sorry for the long episode, but I think there's so much to cover with an adapter like this. It's not a cheap adapter. It's a great adapter, but I don't think it would be justified to do this in just 5 minutes. So that's why we did a very, very long episode. If you're still watching, thank you so very much, and I guess you liked it. So, see you again next time, which actually will be probably somewhere next week, because tomorrow I'm not going to do a vlog. We have a workshop, but we also have some appointments in the evening, and, well, I think this one is long enough. So, see you again next time. Bye, guys.